Hi everyone, and welcome to another session in Digital Building Week. It's another one we're really excited about because I think it's going to be another really great and interactive discussion. So this session today, our second one for the day, is all about how contractors can drive efficiency in challenging times. I'm joined by Josh Schumann, who's the Business Development Director at Kenham Building, and Christian Carter, Product Marketing Manager at Procore. We'd also love to say a special thanks to Procore for making this session and Building Week in general possible. So that's really great. The session's going to run a little bit differently today than some of the other sessions earlier in the week. So I'd just like to run through that to kick things off, just to make sure that everyone knows how they can get involved. So I'm going to hand over to Josh and Christian, who are going to have a bit of a discussion, but they're really keen for you guys in the audience to get involved as we go along. So please send through your questions. They'll get to those as they go. Then I'm going to join back in and we're going to have a group chat in the second part of the session. So please, any questions you have at any point, send those through and we'll try and get to all of them and get to them as quickly as we can. So essentially, we're going to talk a lot about centralized information and providing visibility on projects, accelerating change, management to secure payment for out-of-scope works, and optimizing resources and project supply chain. So it's going to be a really great chat and how all of this can be enabled. So I will hand over to the guys because you haven't joined to listen to me.
Thank you, Jordan, and really looking forward to today's discussion, how contractors can drive efficiency in challenging times. Now, as we know, 2020 and 2021 has been a really tough time for managing construction, managing contracts and projects, the face of work being postponed, disrupted at times, cancelled even, and clients generally facing increased costs to meet the social distancing requirements of COVID-19. And this impact has resonated across sites and across supply chains. And what we've seen is contractors advising and supporting clients through this period, helping them to be more practical and pragmatic than ever, and really focusing on helping them work more collaboratively across project teams. And we're here today to really discuss the nuts and bolts of running a construction business through this period. Now, Kenham, I'm going to get Josh to introduce himself in a minute, but are renowned as specialist luxury home builders, which is a reputation that they've earned over 2 decades, really serving that high-end resi end of the market. And what they've always been able to deliver to their clients is an in-depth understanding of every element, from planning and building regulations through to aesthetics. But obviously, these last couple of years have been years like no other in construction. And what we found is that a lot of businesses have leveraged technology solutions to help them with healthy cash flow through connected workflows, through real-time insights, and through increasing project visibility. But really, we're here today to address those nuts and bolts, to see and to really share perspectives from what it's like from the front line of construction projects. So I'm going to get Josh to introduce himself and perhaps just tell us a little bit about Kenham's business and the kind of customers he serves, because it's really interesting.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Jordan, for being a lovely host on the entry there. So my name's Joshua. I work for a company called Kenham Building. So we've been in operation since 1997, although originally we were working hand in hand with a single developer. Over the last 5 years, we've migrated more towards private client work rather than developer work. But the general theme has always been the high end or the sort of the top end of the mid-range stuff, predominantly in London. Although over the last 2 years, with the mass outflow of clients towards the countryside, there has been a little bit of an uptick in sort of our Cotswold and countryside branch, which is very pleasant. I mean, it's a great sector to be in. I mean, you buy some pretty amazing things, and you get to see some and build some incredible homes. I mean, that's sort of us in a nutshell. Although it's interesting actually when I talk about the diversification that we do. So along with the residential, over the last couple of years, where everything's been shaking up with COVID, we've found we've had to maneuver ourselves from a position of predominantly doing large-scale projects to a large influx of sort of smaller projects, sort of around the £500,000 marker, rather than sort of the £2 million marker. So it became a lot more about doing more projects of a smaller value, which meant you had to have more tracking and more sort of abilities. But I'm sure we'll come on to sort of how we sort of dealt with that hurdle as we go through this chat.
Yeah, I mean, let's dive right in right away. I think one of the things that we've seen with successful contractors in this period has been an ability to pivot to other areas of to other geographies, to other regions, or to other types of projects. Definitely got contractors that we work with in Ireland in mind actually on this, who obviously Ireland's been going through a lot of challenges in terms of lockdown in the previous year, which has made any construction which is deemed non-essential really challenging. And you touched on kind of one pivot that Kenham has made there, which is the shift from kind of larger scale to smaller scale. What has that kind of really meant for Kenham as a business?
So, I mean, traditionally we would be on sort of 7 projects a year, ranging from your £2 million up to your sort of £8 million in value, and they're sort of they run over an 18-month period to 18 to 24-month period. So it's slow, but the turnover is significantly higher. I mean, if on so each individual project is sort of turning over sort of £100,000 to £200,000 per month. But if you're then looking at the smaller projects, so what we found is that a lot of people, where they couldn't spend their money going on holiday, or they were stuck inside some rather large houses, considerably larger than some of the flats I'm sure we've been stuck inside, they noticed that they wanted to change things and upgrade things, but those upgrades are sort of more in the £250,000 to £500,000 range. But you're still sort of spending the same value. You're still trying to sort of get out around £100,000 a month in value, but it's on a much more condensed time frame. Which given that the request from the client side was still that they wanted to progress with things, when COVID and everything was slowing everything down, but you're trying to have to keep the projects running at sort of full speed on these smaller projects, it was a really unfortunate time for everyone to sort of want to upgrade their properties, because just the supply wasn't always there and the capacity wasn't always there to keep up. But it's personal preference. We've always worked better with the larger projects. There's more sort of set up, and it's a much more sort of structured approach. It allows everything to sort of be pre-planned in a more organized fashion. The smaller projects are most definitely a larger drain on the employee resources. They take a lot more time from a project manager's perspective, and where costs are constantly changing, they also require a lot more input from the financial side. So it's been important for us to be able to sort of try and monitor, keep track, and I guess this is where I'll use my first P word of the day, Procore, has sort of, we've sort of got a lot more private clients involved in that process there. So specifically with RFIs and sort of decision making, with the smaller projects where everything's running a lot quicker, you need the answers considerably quicker, and clients in our level aren't construction experts. They don't realize the delays or how such a small change can have a massive impact into a project program. Something like we had a client who wanted to change the paint on one of the walls, but the wall was a staircase wall, which was a wall that was being used, and sort of there was, that would then be blocking access to get to the roof that was still under construction. So it's those sort of tiny little bits that you need to sort of reinforce, and allowing, sharing that through the Procore RFIs, and then they could always clearly see how you notify them how much the delay is going to be, whether it's going to be a cost delay or a time delay, and yeah, it's always trying to explain how those little impacts sort of impact them, because otherwise it takes too much resources from us as the project team involved.
Yeah, and you've got a really unique blend of client in that clients that are kind of used to getting what they want, but often on construction projects, right? The client is going to be a construction person or have some knowledge of processes like RFIs, for instance, kind of themselves. And with each smaller project, you're obviously having to do that anew with each one. Have you found any techniques that work particularly well for dealing with these kinds of clients and providing them with that visibility in different times?
I mean, I think the biggest thing has always been communication and sort of more communication. I mean, and it sort of works both upstream and downstream. So more communication to our subcontractors and our suppliers, and likewise more communication downstream to the clients. And it's even the case of just so I mean, we've got some clients who monitor their projects from abroad or the countryside. So from their side, it's photos and videos and sort of how the process is going. But it's also it's moving away from the idea that you're just building as a process. You know, these homes that we're involved with are personal to them. So there's a client emotional attachment to them, and it's all about sort of communication. And I think, strangely, out of COVID, where we've all sort of pulled away from being social, it's sort of bred a more social interaction where we want to communicate more and actually want to get more updates from people, and they're not particularly long, but I mean, so there's a couple of the clients that I still deal with myself, and you know, it's sort of 2 or 3 phone calls a week just to give them an update on if there's anything coming or going, and it's I mean, Chris, you're exactly right. I mean, some of the clients we deal with are very used to getting what they want. I mean, exceptionally used to it. And they pay a lot of money to get what they want, essentially. That response is actually what I've been told many times of, Josh, I'm paying a lot of money to get this, why can't I get it? But it's you have to just sort of explain to them that there are other things going on, that it's not always about money. You know, money isn't driving it. I can't just throw money at the solution, unfortunately. Things are just taking considerably longer. But if you communicate that to the client through sort of phone calls and photos and their understanding on the RFIs and the program, and you have to teach them at the front end of the project. I heard a great line that says you should always work on the bad things when the good times are happening. So at the beginning of the project, everyone's really excited, and that's where you put your groundwork in place for how you deal with when the shit hits the fan. You need to have everything sort of in place. You need to know how you're going to deal with it early on, because it will because it's construction, and that seems to just be the way that it works. But if you've sort of explained how RFIs work and what the delays work and how to understand a program, I mean, again, Chant isn't super difficult to understand, and if you constantly update it and show it, then the client sort of feels that you're in control. And there's a couple of clients who have suffered some massive delays on their projects through subcontractors and suppliers, and I keep feeling like I'm going to him with another excuse. First it was COVID, and then there was no fuel, and then there's an issue in Europe, and but where he feels confident that we're on top of it. So even though his project is 2 months delayed, he understands that we're pushing as hard as we can to get him what he wants.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for that approach of putting the training in. I think you know, businesses, people in general, are inclined sometimes to ease off, when the going is good, but it's actually that upfront investment in the relationship and in that time that buys you the capital to be able to go to be able to move forward when things are bad. What's your kind of structured process for kind of onboarding them at the start of the project?
So most of our clients initially, I'm their first sort of point of call. Although my title is business development, I mean it's quite a varied role because it's a small company, unfortunately, or fortunately, which means I get to do lots of exciting things. But it all starts with building their trust at the beginning. Probably 30% of our projects are, well, 40% of our projects are sort of gifted to us, essentially, where we agree the price and the value with the client directly. There's no tender process, there's no external QS. It's all built on the relationship of trust and our history, either working with them previously or with somebody that they know. And that trust is sort of where it starts. Now, if it's a client we've already worked with, obviously it's a lot easier. They're sort of aware of the processes that we deal with, but it's always just sort of checking in with them. When a project is sort of appointed, the contracts manager will sit down with a client team, if there's a client team or the client as an individual, and present the program, which is obviously in the Gantt chart format. And literally walk them through the process. So I mean, it's sort of an hour to 2 hour long meeting, depending on the size of the project, but it's walking them through the process so that they understand what the milestones are and where the path of resistance is and what potentially could impact or delay the project. We're all sort of normally aware that there are items that just take longer than they should. Be it joinery, be it windows and glazing seems to be a nightmare at the moment, and it's sort of highlighting to the client that these are the dates that we need information from you, and that then creates the IRS schedule, and then from there we then create or we upload all of the RFIs onto Procore. And slowly start working through them with the client to try and get the answers relevant. So I mean, it's all that sort of onboarding process is based around the program and based around when we need those decisions and how those decisions are going to impact the project.
Yeah, so this is the level of getting people involved in the construction terminology in the construction world right from the outset. That really like that. And actually, I think segues into a really nice question that we just got through from the chat, which is, how does the level of visibility of information change on a small project compared to a large project?
Interesting. I'd say one would expect that on a larger project there needs to be more, but in a way it's the other way around. The smaller projects tend to be more sort of visually demanding from the client's perspective, and they want more updates. They want more sort of insight into what's happening. It's a strange relationship, and I think it's basically got to do with money and how the projects are financed. So quite often on the larger scale projects, your 2.5 million plus, there's quite often some sort of bank lending or funding or something of those standards. Regardless of how wealthy the individual is, money is fairly cheap to come by to those who have it. So a lot of it's bankrolled through other capacities. But when it's sort of a smaller thing of sort of 250 to 400, they're quite often bankrolled by those individuals personally. So they feel sort of more sort of concern because it's their real money. The money is literally coming out of their accounts, and they can visibly see that, and they get a lot more stressed on that capacity. So I mean, there's one client that we deal with who she gets very stressed whenever I send her an invoice, even though every invoice shows how, you know, all the past payments and all the future payments that she's due to make. She always gets very stressed about the whole thing and is concerned, and it's because it's coming out of sort of her actual sort of pot of money. So where the bigger projects, where they're running a sort of a slower process, it's a lot more of a, you know, if you think over an 18-month period, the sort of the speed at which you're going through, I mean, there's a lot more happening. There's a lot more happening, but it's over a much, you know, larger period of time, and there are larger milestones, if that makes sense. You know, if you're digging a basement and you're doing a full refurb, then obviously you've got the basement dig, and that's like one phase, and then you've got to strip out it, and it's a slower process. But if all I'm doing is sort of a £500,000 refurb of the house, then once I've finished demo and I'm putting stuff back, those are the only 2 milestones. You've got milestone 1, which is strip everything out, and milestone 2 is finish. And it's how do you've got to then fill in all the gaps, because I've got to charge you for those costs. So yeah, that's sort of an elongated answer to your question, but I sort of hope that sort of answers your question in a way.
No, I love that. It kind of reminds me of the kind of diagram with the 3 circles, which is like how to draw an owl, and like draw 3 circles and then draw the rest of the damn owl, which is but I guess, yeah, you know, there will be some projects where the scope of work is like that, right? Where it is quite simple to be able to kind of scope it out, you know, in some ways. Interested to dig in as well. Obviously, probably a skill that you have developed over the past year or so is, are you able to develop a kind of spidey sense for when trouble, you know, might be coming on the project, and how do you use kind of that project information and that project visibility to drive, you know, kind of leading indicator that there might be something of concern coming up?
Spidey sense is right when the project starts. I mean, yes, you can sort of gauge a feel. I mean, projects sort of run in a sort of an S. You know, they start off. There's always loads of intention at the beginning. Everyone's really excited. They're enthusiastic. You get information really quickly. It then sort of drifts off a little bit, and people realize that you're coming to the end of the project, and then everything hits the fan, and you suddenly have to speed up again. And suddenly, you know, you're like a month away from finishing, and all of the answers come flooding in that you've been asking for the past, you know, 6 months. But I mean, I guess one of them is it drives back to the sort of the communication. When the communication slows down with either a supplier or a client, that's when you sort of start to feel that you need to change your tact. So if you know, if from a supplier's perspective you're expecting an order, and you don't sort of hear anything, and you've sent them a couple of emails and you've called them a couple of times and there's no real, then you need to change the way or sort of look to adjust the program and work out, okay, well, that item may not be coming when we're expecting it to come. They haven't told us yet, but we can assume, given that they're being a little bit cagey, so we need to adjust accordingly. And how is that then going to impact the rest? And it's sort of similar from a client's perspective. I mean, the best way from the client side is if you, you know, there's sort of 3 ways you can communicate with the clients. Either it's via an email or an RFI or a software. You've got a phone call or a meet on site, and it's you've just got to change. You know, if you find that you're getting blocked and you're not getting the information you need, then it's always good to, you know, go back to the beginning of the project where you showed them the chart, you showed them how it works, and you showed them that, you know, look, this thing, if we don't get the answers that we need, then all of this is going to shift this way, and it's just going to end up costing you more money. So it's taking them sometimes back to site and taking them all the way back to the beginning of the project and explaining to them the process again, because, you know, these guys, they're not construction experts, and they don't, you know, most of them are living busy lives and working and all that sort of thing. So it's just trying to remind them that although this is their passion project, they sometimes do need to be more involved, and you need to hold their hand sometimes. I mean, it's really important that although it's construction, it's bricks and mortar, it's build stuff quick. It's on a lot of projects for houses, not so much with offices that we dabble in as well, but on the residential side, it's very much a personable project for both us and the client, and it's a team thing, and you've got to make sure that there's buy-in on all sides.
No, I think great, and got great insight there on the communication required. Sometimes the hand-holding of the client, and I guess a lot of the time the client is going to kind of be going on their own, particularly if they're doing this for the first time, their own journey. Really good follow-up question came in the chat as you were speaking there. And I think the follow-up question kind of covers everyone's dream in this, which is that on your wonderful descriptions, talking about the kind of natural trajectory a project goes on, are there ways to kind of smooth out those curves? Are there kind of tactics to employ? I know one of our customers, for instance, uses the number of RFIs on a drawing. On the drawings, the start of the project is a kind of leading indicator as to where the trouble is coming. If there's lots of RFIs on the drawings when they first get them, they know to kind of factor in additional time. But I guess other than communicate more and over communicate, which I think is good advice for all of us in life and as well as in construction. Are there kind of tactics that you've employed that can kind of break you out of this S curve? Is that even really possible?
I mean, I think it's always going to be slightly inevitable, just the way that the human mind works. I mean, we're all young, and we had coursework to do, and most people did the coursework. They may have started at the beginning, but it was always at the end. There's always a big rush to get something completed. But I mean, one of the sort of the best ways is offering your guidance and offering your support. So we've built numerous houses, and we've done the process numerous times. And if you sort of were to calculate all of the the total value of sort of experience that the company has, you're looking probably in the hundreds of sort of similar style and similar concepts. So often, some of the reasons that you don't get answers is confusion. Really, it's miscommunication, misunderstanding, and it's trying to clear up that as quickly as you can. Now, one of the best ways that we do it is you switch the RFI around almost, and you say, look, this is the way that we're going to do it, because to meet your program, because at the end of the day, the client wants you to finish the project. If it's got the wrong wallpaper on the wall, it's not going to make or break the project, but it may sort of, if that delay is, that was probably a bad example, but if that causes sort of a significant delay and they can't move in for 2 months afterwards, then that is going to make or break the project. So sometimes it's for the contractor to sort of take it upon themselves in a way to suggest a route, suggest, look, in the past we've done this route and this is what we're going to go with. Do you have any concerns or issues on it, on that side? Rather than asking them, what would you like to do? Instead, you say, this is what we're going to do. And sometimes it backfires, and sometimes they say, actually, no, I don't like that. It's rubbish. But you've then created a little bit more. You've given them something that they can then come back to, rather than an open question of just, what would you like? Which is, I mean, there are too many options. So it's always simplify it down and give them an option that you think would work, and then work back from there.
Yeah, it's really interesting that, right? And I guess one way, and almost the default way of looking at customer service, is where you ask the customer like everything about every minutiae and give them control over every decision. But sometimes I guess that's not the most helpful thing for the course of the project, for actually getting it finished on time.
No, I mean, giving the client control on that side is never wise. And I would strongly, the role of the contractor is to guide the client through the build process. And it's quite common that I think people rely too much on client inputs and sort of waiting for decisions to happen without sort of enforcing them to happen. And it happens on every project. So this isn't just focused on the smaller things, this happens on the larger ones as well. But there's always going to be a point in time where something isn't happening quick enough. And you know, from our side, we then always have to make sure that, you know, we are, you know, it's our project to run. It's for us to make sure and guide and lead the process, not sort of be led by other principals, because then it just gets murky and you then have sort of too many chefs without enough, you know, without somebody sitting at the, somebody needs to drive the train. There you go, too many analogies. Drive the train.
Too many analogies, too many chefs.
Yeah,
again, you're the chef, and you know what you tend not to do is, unless you're feeling particularly malicious, is invite the diner into the kitchen to cook the meal for you. And I think on that, and touching on a few issues which we talked about, how do you manage those kind of unrealistic client expectations? I guess you've learned a few techniques for how to be firm with clients that know what they want, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can't be, it's a careful balance, because, you know, when it comes to the project, it's, you know, we are theoretically the experts, it's, you know, and we're the ones that sort of are driving the project, but at the same time the client is paying us to get a service out of the back end. But it's not like going to a shop where you pay to buy something and you get it and you walk away. It's, you need the client to be involved, and you need the client's team to be involved all the way through. So it's always really challenging when you sort of say to a client, look, this is going over budget and and being delayed because you're not doing your part. And it's then back for us to say and to reinstill the concept that it's definitely a team for, you know, client, contractor, design team. That's, you know, there are three people that have to be working in unison to sort of get projects across the line. And quite often it doesn't become that sort of team. I mean, there have been projects where you know, things can get a little bit hostile, and, you know, you've got QSs get involved sometimes on the client side, and then the QSs on our side, and you have to try and get back to the humanity side of the whole thing, and realize that, you know, I try and avoid email communication when it comes to these things. Emails can be misread, they can be very hastily sent, and they're just sometimes not always clear. When it comes to helping clients sort of understand their problems, it's a face-to-face. And look, I mean, there's been face-to-faces where I've been, you know, they firmly had firm words thrown at me, and you just have to sort of accept that, because, you know, I refer back to my earlier comment of they're emotionally attached to their projects. So, you know, they're with, or, you know, whatever your views are, but personally, I think they're within their right to be slightly upset if things are going wrong, regardless of whose fault it is. This isn't about blaming people, because the blame is with the team. The team is the people involved. It's not just the contractor's fault or the designer's fault or the client's fault. It's everyone's fault for not being able to unitely drive the project forward. So the best way is always to try and sort of remind them that it's a team thing, and accept that, you know, things go wrong, but as long as you are always there with a fix, there's nothing worse than when somebody says, oh, by the way, this doesn't work, and then sort of stops there. You need a, this doesn't work, but this is how we're going to fix it, or this is the backup. You've always got to go with the backup. So, I mean, to answer your question, how do you deal with a demanding client when things go wrong? You always make sure you've got an answer. Yeah, never go into one of those conversations without having a solution.
Yeah, absolutely. I think on that, and, you know, an area where a lot of things have been going wrong, you know, the last year is the supply chain, and the industry have been navigating supply chain challenges for the last year, whether it's paint or plasterboard or whatever the latest one is. But how does the supply chain play into this, and how do you go about communicating that back up the supply chain to the client effectively?
I mean, this is always a tricky one, because from the client's perspective, they instruct us. So from their point, they don't really care about the issues that our subbies are having or our suppliers are having. It then sits on us, and there's no sort of deviating from that. You know, you've got to live there, and you've got to own that position. And it's I mean, it's really tough. I mean, there's a couple of areas, some that we're dealing with at the moment, where especially stuff that involves factories. There was one factory that we were working with that the whole place had to shut down for a month because of a COVID outbreak, which then delayed everything. And then obviously what was even worse is they also have material delays coming from Europe, so that was then another month that was lost. So this item that normally takes 8 weeks is now on 12 or 13 weeks to get, and still not getting it. And how do you explain that back up the food chain? It's you can't leave it to the last minute. You know, constant updates, but also going back down the food chain. I mean, it's tricky, because you as the contractor, you're the middleman. You are literally stuck in the middle between the client who is paying you and the subby who most of the time you've had to pay a deposit to, and you are a little bit stuck. I mean, yes, you can. You know, it goes back to communication and trying to make sure that the subcontractor is communicating as well as possible. But it's also working out your relationship with the subby. If you can help them supply, I mean, so there was one instance where we managed to find a supplier, or we went through one of our other suppliers to supply the product to the company to then get us the product that we wanted. So it was a really convoluted way of getting it, but we ended up getting the flooring and it was all fine. But it's having that communication and opening up the resources, sort of opening up our sort of resource pool to our subcontractors again, and making sure that if we can help them, then they help us. And it's all that, you know, it goes back to the humanity of, you know, we're all humans on the other side of the email or the other side of the phone call. So if we can work out the problem together, then hopefully I can give the client good news rather than more bad news.
Yeah, and that's a really neat way of looking at it, I think, especially for a business like that. And so often we see like the relationship, the main contractor to client relationship being the one that's kind of prioritized, and the main contractor is there to kind of interface with the client. But obviously, with as you said, you're used to solving these kinds of problems for clients. You're working on similar-ish kind of scopes of work. You're going to know, you're going to have your own network of suppliers, you know, that you work with, whether it's like high-end paint or a particular kind of wallpaper. And I guess you're in a position to kind of pass that information on to onto the clients and have kind of more of a consultative relationship with them as well.
I mean, one of the ways that we've been trying to sort of understand our subcontractors more is to work out what their capacity is and what capacity they're at. Now, to get to that level, it does require a little bit of, you know, you need to have a fairly good relationship with them. Not everyone's willing to sort of share that sort of stuff with you. But I mean, as a company, I'm aware that we quite often find somebody that we quite like, and then everyone uses them and you sort of overload them a little bit too much, which is very common. So one of the ways that we've sort of got around that is we have sort of a master program which shows, you know, what elements on each project are going to be sort of happening at the same time. You know, do we have 6 kitchens with the same kitchen company all coming in at the same time? If so, that's probably a little bit silly, and maybe we just need to find somebody else, because that's going to, you know, and if you have a master program of all your projects and where they're all lining up, you can sort of see that oversight, which Procore lets you do that, by the way, just FYI. It's a really good conversation to have, because you need to know, you know, are you the main employer of that subcontractor? You know, is there another project that's going to draw them away? If your project is pushed back 2 weeks, is it going to, you know, can they help you in 2 weeks time, or is that 2 week slot you've got now the only availability? So I think we need to learn more about, or we need to be more willing to share our own, you know, company information and the information of others that we're working with. You know, it shouldn't be a secret, you know, how many projects you have on, or, you know, how many members of staff you have and what your capacity is, so that everyone can make an informed insight. And I can go, you know, look, Fred, you know, you're the best supplier we've got, but I know that if I give you this project, you're going to be overloaded, and these other 3 are going to struggle. So you need to have that conversation, and I think it's really important that you know, find out how your suppliers are actually doing. I mean, when was the last time, I don't know the demographic of the people listening to this call, but when was the last time some of you called up one of your suppliers and actually just called them up to chat about their company and ask them how they're doing? And it's not, I mean, not on a personal level, I mean, you can do that, that's fine, but as in find out what they're struggling with, because A, you may be able to help them, which wins you a lot of brownie points in the future, but B, it's incredibly useful insight to then programming your own projects for the next sort of 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, no, I think that is it's a really good point. And you know, one of our clients has a, you know, really nice way of putting it. They're an M&E subcontractor and talk about setting themselves up as the main contractor to the main contractor. And they deal with actually deal with residential properties as well, kind of the volume residential builders. And that really talks to that point around kind of opening up the visibility. Like you say, there's a natural tendency to be kind of opaque and, you know, let on that you can take on more work than you can, or not want to necessarily reveal if you're quiet and you know, Kenham is the only contractor that they've got kind of on the books. But I think we have to work towards a spirit of information sharing. I'm going to give kind of one more question from the chat, and then I'm going to ask you a kind of forward-looking question, break away from the doom and gloom of COVID and supply chain a little bit. But in terms of that, and I think you touched on it a little bit, how do you break down the traditional silos that construction operates in to do this? What changes do you think need to be made? I guess that's asking as much culturally as it is as it is asking about kind of your own business processes.
I mean, I think it's. I mean, so I've been in construction now for coming on towards sort of 9-10 years, and in that time, I've personally seen a change in how construction operates, and I think it's more to do with sort of the old guard of construction are, you know, coming to an end, and there's sort of a newer breed that are, you know, more tech savvy and more tech central, but are also sort of more aware that you can't isolate yourself in this world anymore. You know, there are so many connections, and it's all about connections and people. And you know, the old adage of "it's who you know, not what you know" is incredibly valuable in construction, because I guarantee you the amount of times I get a call from a PM to pull in a favor from somebody else that I've made contact with, it's probably actually once every 2 weeks or so that I have to pull in a favor, but it's creating those sort of favors. And it's I mean, I guess back in the day, well, actually it's interesting. So back in the day, I always was told that, you know, on a Friday, everyone, you know, the QSs would all meet up and they'd all discuss you know, the valuations over a pint, and then somehow emails came along, and now valuations are battered forth, you know, back and forth over an email communication. So it's almost going back to the beginning again, and going back to that process of, well, let's actually just chat about it. but we've had this bit in the middle, which we're sort of coming out of where everything, well, nothing was personal. I mean, everything was, you know, you had the institution of the, you know, the cubicle sort of office setup and the work mentality, which I think as a race, as a, you know, everyone, we're sort of moving away from that and realizing that that's not the most efficient way to work anymore. The most efficient way to work is to be, you know, to talk to each other, and to make sure that you're not hiding behind processes or anything like that. So, I mean, I hope that sort of answers your question.
Yeah, I think it takes me on to that maybe you've just given the answer there. So you've got a forward-looking question of obviously like an incredible like 2 years, you know, that's maybe wrapped up in a 5-year period, you know, when we look back at it, or a 10-year period of intense technological change, which this COVID period has really accelerated. What is your kind of big takeaway, I guess, when you're kind of sitting down in a year or two's time, when kind of all of this has passed? What will you kind of look at during the COVID period and think, yeah, that really changed during then, and or what did you kind of really learn during that period?
I mean, I think the COVID has sort of hastened the change in the construction sector. I mean, obviously this is sort of a tech broadcast and we haven't spoken too much about it, but that's one of the areas where construction has always been massively far behind every other sector. And so much so that there's almost been like a fear to use construction. I mean, everyone's happy to use Facebook and Instagram, but to use construction software is you know, unheard of. Actually, we did have somebody who didn't want to sign up to Procore because they were afraid of data, but they were happy to sign up to Facebook and Instagram. So, but it's those sort of bits that are coming through in construction, and that's been noticeable through this period. So, I mean, I guess over the next couple of years, what I'm seeing is an increase in tech, but at the same time, an increase in sort of actual face-to-face communication and more personable communication. So rather than the days of the emails, when they were introduced, it was a case of here's an email, here's an email, here's an email, here's an email. It's now more of a case where the tech is there to support you all the way through, because it does more than just allow you to bounce stuff back and forth. You can actually track stuff and monitor stuff and record stuff and update stuff, all sort of more automated. And the actual gaining of that information is going to be a more personal approach. You know, the Zooms and Teams and all those sort of bits and pieces have allowed for a much more communicatable sort of way of discussing. I mean, fortunately, I can now sort of work from home more, but it means that I can actually have more meetings in a day because I don't need to travel to the meeting, and you have more productive meetings. I mean, so I intentionally don't pay for my Zoom, so it forces every meeting to finish after 45 minutes, which is incredibly useful. It's not because I'm cheap, but it sort of, it means that, you know, you get to the point quicker, but you can have more of them. And it's those sort of bits which I think are sort of quite exciting, and it should make for a nicer, sort of more enjoyable workplace in construction. Sort of rather than always feeling like we're chasing our tails, we can actually sort of have better oversights from the tech side, but actually have more human interaction from the personal side, which is what, you know, we all as humans, we need to have that sort of idea. But at the same time, look, it's really cool seeing how things like BIM are coming into it. I mean, it's not huge in our sector. There's been a couple, but I've been to a few where you can sort of hold your phone up as you walk around the building and you see the BIM model. So, you know, I mean, there's that side, which I think is going to be incredibly exciting. But there's a bit of a split between sort of the super projects like the airports that are using a different side of construction tech, and how construction tech impacts sort of the more domestic relationship clients. But no, it's I mean, look, the future is very exciting coming forward, and I think if you look at other sectors that have embraced tech and embraced that sort of working profile, they're all booming. You only need to look at the stock market to see which companies are doing really well and which companies aren't. But it's you know, I think construction is coming there, and we're sort of moving into sort of a new sort of age of excitement, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I would definitely say that a lot of the reason why we haven't seen the change within technology, within construction, a lot of that is actually on the construction software industry. You know, tools like Facebook, Uber, Slack, you know, on the whole have made it very easy and very seamless, and invested a lot of time and effort into making data entry and data input feel really natural. And I would say that change hasn't always taken place within construction in the same way. And I definitely believe that the solution to this is really a partnership, speaking as someone who works for a software company, between the construction industry and between the software industry, and that the construction industry has actually had a kind of really heightened sense to when processes don't work and don't wrap around the way that they work, and don't wrap around the course of construction. So I don't think it's often portrayed as, you know, construction not adopting tech, but I think a lot of it has been the software itself, both in terms of the UI and the support that goes with it, has not always been there for construction in the same way. And obviously we're certainly looking to change that, and looking to evolve that on our side. I just want to throw open, we've had a great discussion from the floor so far. I just want to throw open to the floor in the last few minutes, in the spirit of Josh saying, Josh's S-curve, you know, all of the changes coming towards the end of the project or the call. Are there any last questions that we have from the floor? I see Jordan joined us again now as well.
Maybe just to, so that I can throw to both of you at the same time, be easier. I'm going to be really cheeky and jump in with one of my own first, because I have that in front of me and I've been sitting here patiently waiting to ask it. So one of the things that you guys need to be talking about a lot is sort of, you know, setting up those paths of communication with clients and having that open. How important is that to sort of establish that from the outset? And then how do you then ensure those expectations that you've established are delivered upon?
Projects don't run well without it, and you can. It's noticeable when you join a project where they haven't had that sort of beginning part of the relationship. You know, if the project hasn't had that sort of honeymoon phase at the beginning, and it hasn't all been laid out, and you haven't had that sort of point where everyone sort of understands what their roles are and who's in charge of what and what's needed from whom, you notice it. But the problem is you notice it too far down the line. You notice it towards the middle of the end, and that's when your S-curve sort of becomes slightly a different shape. But it all sort of it then bunches up, which means you've got then this massive cluster of mess at the end, which takes more resources to get. I mean, look, everything's achievable and you can always do it, but the amount of stress that then creates is vast. So it's I'd almost say try it at home. You know, chat with one client and don't chat with another and see which one works better. But please don't do that. You will find it yourself as the contractor involved. If you have a good relationship with the client, you'll be more inclined to chat with them. You'll be more inclined to get information from them, and they'll trust you more.
And in terms of having that, you know, information to be able to go with them and keep that relationship solid with up-to-date information, how important is it that the data, both from on-site and the office, is all centralized in one place, so everyone knows has the same info? You're not working off different numbers, which is an issue in construction sometimes, that people aren't all looking at the same data source.
Look at that, Chris. You brought it back to Procore for you.
I didn't. I didn't found that one.
It's just we've spoken a lot about data environments this week. It's at the top of mind for me.
That is incredibly important. I mean, there was when we first picked up Procore sort of 5 years ago, four years ago, something like that. I was on site, and there was a steel worker that walked over. He interrupted the client meeting, and he said, "Oh, mate, you know, the this post doesn't work." And the project manager looked at him and said, "That's not even the right drawing." And it's, you know, it's that prime example of if everyone's actually working off the same bit of information, if everyone's aware they're working to the same program, if everyone's looking at the same drawings, if everyone's looking at the same photos, it really harmonizes and smooths out the kinks that you're going to have along the way. And emails get lost very, very quickly. I mean, some of you, maybe like me, you get sort of over the hundreds in the day. And if you're out on the phone, you know, you'll look at it, you'll read it, and you'll forget about it. But if you've got sort of something that, with the RFI, is one of the things that it'll ping you on Procore, it'll remind you that you've got it outstanding, and it's those things which, sure, may be annoying, and those emails may annoy me sometimes more than the original RFI. But the point is, it stops those sort of delays from happening along the way. So putting everything in one place may seem risky, and you may not like the way that it formats it, but that is realistically the future of construction. You know, moving away from folders, moving away from individual Excels that get spread around and shared around and messed up. You know, having that centralized hub is very useful.
Brilliant. We're running out of time very rapidly. So this one's come in on the chat. Do you feel that the increased visibility of all this information, do you feel that improves? I think we've touched on this already, but it has come in, so I will ask it. Do you think that improves the relationship both up and down the supply chain, if that makes sense, like both with your customers and your clients?
Yes, I mean, so definitely with the clients, 100%. Although not every client's different. So some clients don't appreciate too much information, and you need to learn your client quite quickly. You know, some of them want to be updated regularly. Some of them don't care and just want to know when it's finished, and will only ever ask you when it's finished. They don't care about anything else. As far as it working downstream to the subbies, you'll quickly pick out which subbies you can rely on and which subbies you can't. Personally, I feel if the subbie isn't communicating with you and giving you the information you need, then that's a flag for me. That's a warning sign that either the relationship is tarnished and you need to try and work to fix it, or you need to find somebody that you're going to sort of gel with better. So I hope that answers.
Brilliant. No, that's perfect. I am conscious I've only got a couple of minutes left, and we've covered such like a wide scope of information in this session. I think it might be a really great way to wrap up. If I could just ask each of you to sort of give us a few big takeaways that you'd love the audience to leave with.
So I'll go. So 3 big takeaways. Communication is incredibly important. Remember that software is there to help you. It's not something to hide behind. It's something to enhance the communication. And lastly is try and enjoy yourself. Clients know when shit's hit the fan, and they can sort of pick it up. So own your mistakes and provide sort of a solution. And if you sort of try and enjoy the process all the way through, then you'll get a better example at the end.
Yeah, I think great insights. I think what I see, you know, obviously we work with clients of all shapes and sizes, from kind of residential to building hospitals, and I think the commonalities that we see is that technology, for one, just provides a common language on projects. A lot of construction is cursed by being custom work for each project, and every project has to be reinvented. New technology will provide that. Also can provide a degree of visibility as well over your projects, and enable you, act as an enabler to deliver that customer experience. But I would come back, you know, finally and say, you know, I see the future as being a partnership between the construction industry and between the software industry. So let us know, you know, what your requirements are. and where you are and what you're trying to achieve as a business, most importantly. And if any of what you've heard today resonates with you, we'd definitely love to get in touch and love to start a conversation. But today's about Josh, really. So, thank you, Josh.
Every day's about me, Chris.
Sometimes to your detriment, maybe.
Thank you both so much. I think that was it was a really fascinating chat to listen into, and I'm really glad that I got to be a little bit of a part of it at the end and get a couple of my own questions in. So yeah, first of all, big thanks to both Chris and Josh for joining us today for another really great Digital Building Week session. And as I said at the start, a huge thanks to Procore for making this session and the whole of Digital Building Week possible. So we really appreciate that. Would just like to flag that we've had a couple of this come through in the chat. So yes, this session is available on demand, probably within about half an hour of us wrapping up, just to give the video time to load and do whatever it does in cyberspace. It'll be available via the same link that you joined today, and it will still be free. So if you want to watch it again, if you want to recommend it to a colleague or someone, yeah, just pass that link on and it will still be there. Tomorrow, Digital Building Week wraps up, but tomorrow is the launch of our cybersecurity stream. So that's another one that's definitely worth checking out. And that's all that information is on all three of our homepages: building, building design, and housing today. So that's it for this one. And thanks to everyone for joining us. So thanks, Josh. Thanks, Chris. And I'll see you all soon.
Thank you.